WCLN 1170 Radio and Cable Channel 16 are pleased to present We Should Know, hosted by J.W. Simmons, an upbeat, informative look at people, places, and issues facing our community. This education-based analysis of issues will remain positive and informative as we consider closely what we should know.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We Should Know's on there. I want to thank you for being with us today. We're coming to you from Star Communications Channel 16, WCLN Radio. There's a summation in the Sampson Weekly newspaper. Again, we're bringing you a topic of interest, almost importance at the time that we're bringing this to you of a critical sense. Somebody that's always been there for many people in this county, a person that is not only our guest, but a friend of ours, somebody that many people will recognize in my introduction, and those people that are watching on TV, once you see him, you'll know exactly who I'm talking about. It's Jimmy Matthews. It's somebody that's been part of Sampson County, running a business here for over 50 years in operation. Jimmy, there's many things I want to say in the introduction, but a couple of things I want to get out very quickly. And one of them, you have so many accolades and so many things that people have said positive, but one of the things that occurred just a while back was this event that occurred. It actually was an event set up to deliver to you something called the Order of the Longleaf Pine, which is the highest honor that can be distributed to anyone in this state by the state of North Carolina. It speaks and bodes well of what people in this community think about you and what you do in the community.
JW, that's pretty humbling, because this is a community that I have lived in all my life. I love dearly, and what I've done has been with a lot of other people's help. Nobody does anything by themselves, but we team up, do things, get something accomplished, and then move on to the next need that we have. So thank you. Well, it's very humbling. All my kids were here and grandkids, and that was quite impressive to have them standing there with me on that day. So thanks again.
Well, it has been and will continue to be emblazoned in history that at least folks stepped up and said, we appreciate and thank you for what you've done and what you continue to do. And I want to say also, as we get into the subject matter today, that I'm very pleased and proud to say that you are part of my personal medical team. As you know, I call on my doctor, and I don't mind talking about him, but I also let folks know you got to have a team with medicine today. You cannot have one person anymore, and you are that person for me and hundreds of thousands probably of other people out there that call out to you each and every day.
Well, it's a pleasure. I mean, it's my passion. What I learned to do by watching my dad and my mom, who were in healthcare. My mom was a nurse and my dad worked and operated a pharmacy. And it was a way of life I just thought was super and special. And I was just very blessed to be able to follow in their footsteps.
But Jimmy, we are at an unusual time. Before we came on air, we were talking about some of the more foreboding things that's occurring in society and things that's happening around us. We have been thrust into an era called COVID-19. Just a few months ago, I could not have told you what that meant or what it was about. But it's hit, and the vortex of it kind of lands at the feet of the medical community, of which you're a part of. It lands at the feet of everyone, but we look at the medical community not only for advice, but direction. We look there for analytics, particularly in the pharmaceutical world. There's two things I'd like to balance today and ask you to help us understand, because you are there, and one of them is small business operations in this time. The other is in the world of understanding prescriptions and pharmaceuticals, with over 50 years involved in that. And of course now you're affiliated with Mart, but you're still a privately owned, family owned business. Many people says, well, what is Health? Well, Mart just helps you to get some of those prescriptions and drugs at a bit better price because it's in volume. Is that a good way to say it?
Well, they do a lot of things for us. It is important that they help us be able to purchase things that we want to sell to people. People need equipment or either medicines or what have you at a price that we can afford to sell it, and people can afford to buy it. That's the key today, is having some buying power. And so this group is a nationwide group. Mm-hmm. They also help support us in the professional things that we do, help us be better pharmacists and better caregivers, strengthen us through education and other things along that line that make us who we want to be. We're all majority of us are in small rural communities. There are some in larger towns, but in environments where people need assistance, want assistance, and where we enjoy providing that. So I'm being part of that team. So Health Mart is just a really great tool for an independent owner to join into. You're part of that program. They don't own you. You use their resources, and you're part of a team with other guys across this country. So it's a wonderful organization. I've enjoyed being a part of that for close to 30 years now.
That's one of the things I liked about when I was reading about Health Mart. You're exactly right. One of the things that they put forth as part of their model is that they don't own it. They just supply you with what you need. And in today's world, you've got to have that kind of connectivity to do a better job for the people you serve.
Right, to have the resources to obtain the products and everything, the services that you can put together to provide to people. You know, it's nice to be a part of a team, then not somebody dictating to you, but offering you things that you can use to be effective in your practice.
You have an interesting operation in the sense, Jimmy, you are a pharmacist. You are also a small business owner in the sense that you have a business that is somewhat separate from the pharmacy. So you can look at it from how you've been basically confronted with dealing with both worlds, the pharmacy being something that's considered a vital service, okay, but yet the gift shop that everybody knows and where it's at and that kind of thing there at the shopping center is not part of that. Kind of give us a big picture of how it's been to try to create a world of survivability as a small business owner with both of those umbrellas that you're looking at.
Well, you know, it is the extreme, and so I have experienced both of them, been blessed enough to be as a pharmacy, to be essential and needed, and therefore I didn't have to worry about, can I go to work? It was pretty much said, you will go to work or can go to work. Mm-hmm. You're essential, people need you. So that was really neat, honestly, to not have to struggle through the other part. In all honesty, with this virus, what we're doing is just taking care of people's normal needs right now. And because there are no medications out there to treat or prevent this virus at this point in time, but people needed the medicines and everything that were ongoing to survive and stay well. And then the other extreme where, like so many people, with the gift shop, it's not essential, and we were trying to eliminate people being on top of people, spreading this virus more rapidly and paying attention to what needs to be done, and so therefore that business had to be shut down and for like 2 months. And so I can feel the pain that a lot of people are experiencing in small retail and any business. I mean, it affects large businesses as well, having to cut back and reduce, and that's been painful. There have been some nice things put into place through our government and all to kind of assist companies like that. But the gift shop is a unique animal on its own, in that it has seasonal times. Mm-hmm. And so we're kind of in the midst of one of those seasonal times. We missed part of one of those seasonal times that they count on. And so it's going to be interesting as we reopen and get started back again with that business. There's still going to be a lot of fallout, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. I heard a guy say today, I'm not a social animal. I'll go and order out, but it might be a while before I'll go to a restaurant and sit down and eat at a restaurant for a while. And so those people and a lot of other people have got a lot of a learning curve that we're going to be going through. We're not through the worst or all of it at this point in time. Probably the worst, hopefully, because we were shut down. Mm-hmm. Now we're able to operate, and hopefully we won't have to go back again where we had to close doors. But my heart does bleed for these guys who are really stressed in so many industries, who didn't have that chance to work like we did in the pharmacy. I mean,
absolutely, and I think when you look at the gift shop side, you had some great employees there. I know I've been in a number of times. Everybody's been very helpful. I mean, all you've got to do is say, well, I'm looking something for a particular situation, and they just guide you everywhere. And it's a huge operation as far as the size and the square footage. I don't know whether folks hadn't been in it, but they need to go in there and look around. And I think one of the things you bring is a sense of uniqueness to that too, because everybody that I see in there oftentimes is looking something unique and special. Well, we do live in Sampson County, and unless somebody's bringing that to us to be able to purchase, to get it, either you got to go online and try to find it, or you got to drive somewhere. So it brings that. But when it comes to the employees, let's talk a bit about that, because I know a lot of the funding that the government has sent out to small business has been able to allow you to sustain employability with not as much risk maybe, but at the same period of time, there's some vulnerabilities within that.
Yeah, I think the nice things that happened, honestly, there were some things that happened very quickly on the government level. Of course, unemployment was there, and then there was the stipend that came along to people. A lot of people received an additional $600 a week along with unemployment. So when we had to shut down the gift shop, those people were qualified for those kind of benefits. But then the government put together some specialty type loans to try to get these businesses up, back and running and sustain them for a period of time as they come out of that shutdown. And that's what we're kind of in right now. I think they put together what I see is a really, really good program. I know it's expensive. I mean, I know what we got, and you multiply that by other people, but it has allowed a business to be able to be closed, pay their rent, pay their light bill, and then now start hiring those people back and having funds there to do it when you're not generating money coming in at a rate that you need to make those overheads. So some really, really good things. A lot of tough decisions on people's part. Everybody has their own need or their own personal situations, and the things you have to consider is, how am I health-wise? Am I able to be exposed? Can I go back to work? So there are a lot of interesting questions, but a lot of good solutions out there for us as well, I think.
We're going to take our first break and come back. I want to continue the conversation about that a little bit after the break. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back in a moment. Stay tuned. We're talking with Jimmy Matthews. Call a friend.
Experiencing slow internet? If you have a fast internet package, the problem is most likely your wireless router. With more devices using Wi-Fi, your wireless router may not be able to deliver the speed and coverage you need. We now have the leading solution to enhance your internet experience. Using small devices in a mesh network, these Wi-Fi appliances cover just about any size home so that all your devices can operate to their fullest potential. Whole home Wi-Fi from Star Communications. Get the most out of your internet connection.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Thanks for being with us today. We Should Know is on the air. My name is J.W. Simmons. It's my guest today. I have Jimmy Matthews, whose name is well known in the area. Oftentimes, I hear people say Jim Matthews. I hear people say even James Matthews. I've always known you, and a lot of folks that I know you as Jimmy Matthews. But Jimmy, you've always been associated with so many things of great value here, and I can't help but mention your work with the Clinton Area Foundation for Education, which supports students and teachers in Clinton City schools. That has been a huge part of our community. In fact, a lot of folks have made the statement, how do we model that kind of thing? How do we do that in our area? And those kinds of things, as I look at what you do has galvanized you. Before we went on air, we talked about your work with First Baptist Church, your devout faith in Jesus Christ. The whole idea of the core values are part of what I think this community stands for.
I mean, I'm just honestly mimicking what I saw done when I grew up. I mean, I saw people care for a community, invest in the community, but I can't stress enough that things like the foundation, that happened because a lot of other people had the same dream and desire. I just happened to be in a position where I could kind of, for lack of a better word, plant the seed. And the thing that's so humbling is that organization goes on today. I recently went back on the board for a few years, which has been fun to do, but it ran without Jim Matthews. And that's the beauty of it, is that people buy in and support and do in this community. So I mean, it's been quite a trip. So I
wanted to follow up from the first discussion, or actually the first segment. into this segment with the conversation on business and small business. There may be folks out there that have not decided to get involved or apply for some of the business, you could call them subsidy loans or whatever, from the government. There's still some of those there. As I talk to a number of politicians, they say, please encourage small businesses to participate. I want you to just kind of talk about it just freely from some of the nuances that are there, some of the things that for folks that maybe have not looked at it, maybe think, well, like, this is just money I can get, and there's I can just spend it ever how I want to. Talk about how critical it is to make sure you know what you're reading and understand it before you reach out to do that.
Well, all of that is true. Everything you said is true. Even I can get it and spend it any way I want to. But if you do that, you're going to have to pay it back at some point in time. There is accountability. Now, I'm going to talk to you what I know about this, but one thing God has blessed me with all my life is a great team of people to work with. Mm-hmm. And so behind the scenes, the gut work on this for us was done by my wife. And she has done a wonderful job in searching it out, looking and making sure that it was something that we needed to do mm-hmm. and should do. And then great helps of people that support our business as accountants and also a local banker. All these people have been just super to work with. So I would suggest that you look at it. It does have a lot of promise. Now we're just, we're in the beginning stages. We did qualify and we started our recipient of the money the first of this month. Mm-hmm. Originally, you've got an 8-week period to reinvest that money. And the idea is you've got to invest it in hiring people back to work, getting them a job. Mm-hmm. You've got to also use it to cover the basic expenses of your business, your rent, and those type of things. You can't just take that, well, you can. You can take that money and go buy yourself a Cadillac. Mm-hmm. But you're going to have to pay it all back because there is an accountability at the end that you've got to say, this is how I invested this money that you have loaned me. Some of this can be forgiven. And so, that's what you really hope that happens, that you invest it wisely, that you keep your business alive, and that in the end, it's forgiven because you invested it in a way that the government intended it for it to try to keep the economy and businesses alive through this time. Now, initially, there was an 8-week period that you had to kind of reinvest this, and it's built on a percentage of what you reinvest and what have you. And, that was a little bit of a challenge or a little bit of a concern, and that's something we're still looking at. But my understanding is that in the last 2 days, Congress has extended that with a vote so that you're not locked in with that 8 weeks. You do have a little bit more time. And I think that was a wise decision that they did because it takes a while to start a business back up, to get its feet on the ground, and moving in a positive direction. And so you might have gotten $10, but in that first 8 weeks, you might have been able to only spend $5 of it. You really need that other $5 because you're just really getting started. Mm-hmm. And honestly, there's going to be some growing pains over this as we rebuild. And so I was encouraged by that because our direction on the funds that we received was to make sure that Matthews Cards and Gifts could survive. Mm-hmm. And in our case, that business is a part of a corporation for which the pharmacy is. And I'm sure this is true with a lot of other people too. So the commitment that the gift shop has in rent and overhead and those type things are tied to a corporation. So part of a corporation is creating revenue. Another part's not creating revenue. One part's creating bills and expenses that they're not creating revenue to help pay. That could pull two businesses mm-hmm. under. It could pull down, the whole operation. Mm-hmm. So, for us, it looks like a wonderful situation and one that's going to help us maintain our businesses in this community. So I would encourage everybody, if you've got a business, to look at it. It might not be the right thing for everybody. I was recently very encouraged because I understand the agriculture community is going to have some of these resources available to them. And we have friends, they're growing animals, and all of a sudden there's an interruption in that chain. And so, we all work hard and we all earn a good living, but we're not always, stacking away money, for all those rainy days, and you can't always stack enough away. there are other places to invest that money. I mean, we have a community we need to support too. Mm-hmm. So we're investing funds into community in various ways other than just jobs to support radio stations, yep. Support newspapers, things that are so vital, schools and what have you. So there are resources that we use in multiple ways, but I think for all of us, there is a certain amount of survival in this for independent small businesses. So if it's for you, I would encourage you to look at it and consider it. And I'm just trusting that what we understand it's going to be is for real. And if so, then that will be wonderful. And like I say, I just really wish that good luck for everybody and good fortune, and that it does pay out well for all of us.
And I'm sure you're like we are. You've had conversations with some of the congressmen. Certainly I have, and I think they see exactly what you're saying, and some of the remarks is pretty similar. One of the things that was discussed, and I had this conversation about, was employees. The idea behind some of those funds is to be able to say to your employees, I'm going to be able to keep you on for a certain period of time and help take some of these funds to pay. So when it comes back, when things come back, you can come back to work. And if you do that, then those funds is basically ends up being a grant as opposed mm-hmm. to something that you borrowed,
right.
which is a good thing. I think a lot of folks don't understand that, and maybe they're a little bit too hesitant. But in the print, again, as you pointed out, accountability and the fine print is important. That may be something that could be very beneficial that folks have overlooked.
Yeah, I mean, the idea is to help businesses survive, give people jobs. And one thing it does do is it takes away from unemployment. So mm-hmm. in other words, where a lot of money is being spent on unemployment, as soon as I put JW back to work mm-hmm. and he's on his payroll, then that unemployment goes away. I mean, so it's no longer being drawn from two different mm-hmm. pots. Mm-hmm. So, and it gets that person back into a routine. It gets that business back into a community, getting that community back to the point that it was, providing not only jobs but also support for other things in that community that the community counts on, Boy Scouts and one thing and another. That those resources will be there. And I can't emphasize enough. Again, it's teamwork. Bonnie put in a lot of time. Even used a resource named Scott Matthews, our son, who's a dentist in Kinston, yeah. and he's an independent business person.
Absolutely.
And all of a sudden he couldn't see patients. So I mean, he was in the same boat. So he was able to provide a lot of information that he was gathering, mm-hmm. and he and Bonnie spent a lot of time talking about what they understood about this. And then I can't stress enough, the people that are in your life otherwise, those mm-hmm. bankers that you work with, and your CPAs or accountants or people like that have been just wonderful to work with. They had something thrown on them just out of the dark. I mean, yeah. Here they are, they've got a routine that they're going in, and then all of a sudden all this stuff is thrown on their desk with all these rules and regulations and applications and one thing and another that had to be done. And I just can't thank them enough. I know where they work. I go by their offices going and coming to work early in the morning and late at night. I have seen their vehicles there Monday through Sunday. And so I know that they have invested a lot of time to help people in our community who could use these resources to sustain their businesses and be a part of this community for the future. So.
And I think what I'm hearing too is what you just alluded to for folks that are looking at doing this, it's going to be easy to get to a point and say, well, it's just not worth it. But if they follow the protocols, they follow the procedures and understand accountability, at the end of the day, they're not only going to be helping their business, but they're going to be helping those people that work for them.
Right, and their community, if we all, as we get through this. And they can be paid back a part of this mm-hmm. money that you've been granted. If things, there'll be a time where the report card's unfolded. Mm-hmm. But my understanding is it's not going to be, okay, give me back this right now. I mean, they're not going to go out there. They are going to be kind to you and understand that, there is some settling out, so you'll have time for those resources to be repaid if you needed to. Right?
Absolutely. And we're going to take another break, and I want to kind of just let folks know, hopefully we're going to try to get into some of the pharmaceutical stuff that is a huge part of this when we come back. That piece is going to be critical. So folks, stay tuned, call a friend. We're talking with Jimmy Matthews about critical issues related to COVID.
You come out to replace a bad sensor, and that adds a 5-year commitment to my contract, and you don't tell me? Here's your sign.
Switch to the sign that's keeping homes secure and customers happy all over the area. Security from Star Communications. We pride ourselves on fair pricing and quick, friendly service every time.
Somebody trying to break into this place?
Security from Star Communications.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Thank you for being with us. We're talking about pharmaceuticals. We're talking about small business. We're talking about things that maybe will impact you either as an employee, as an owner, and most definitely the things we're talking about will impact you as a consumer. And we're talking with Jimmy Matthews, who's the owner-operator of 2 businesses. Of course, the gift shop. I call it the gift shop. Matthews Cards and Gifts, whatever. It's a very nice place there at the shopping center. Also, there's the pharmacy, of which your expertise related to medicine is, and your credentials come from. At least I think some school up there called UNC or something had something to do with that. But I don't want to get into that, because we do, then we're going to have to start talking about Ricky Lanois and everybody else. So I want to try to move, if I can, in that area of pharmaceuticals, because basically, as the introduction I used to introduce you, is that you are a vital part of the health team for many people. In fact, literature reveals that in a lot of areas, the pharmacist is the primary caregiver for information when somebody feels something, because you're easily accessible. Is that not true for you and what has been you've experienced?
Yeah, and we appreciate that. I mean, honestly, that's what gives us worth in life and gives us purpose. So, I mean, that's not a problem for us. Doctors are so pressed with what they have to do. A lot of times when you go to a doctor's office and he talks to you about what your illness is, and he's trying to help you in every way possible, and then so first thing you know, he leaves the room, and all of a sudden all these questions come. You know, or you get in the car and you start toward the drugstore and say, well, I don't remember what he said about this or that. So the neat thing about being on this team is that we have great relationships with our physicians, and we value that so much. And so when that patient comes to us, a lot of those things we will have an answer for. But sometimes there's something that maybe we're not clear on, but we have access to get back to that doctor and just say, can you help us explain this to Mr. Simmons?
Yeah.
Because he was thinking one thing, generally that's not the case, and we just want to make sure he's on the right page. So, that's a great place to be. You know, sometimes people call you doc, one thing and another.
Yeah.
I tell them, no, fortunately, I'm not a doctor. I'm a pharmacist, and they live a lot easier life than doctors do, because doctors are really, really stressed.
Well, they are. I think at this particular time, even before COVID, there was a lot of things going on, and especially, I think, in rural areas. You know, and when I talk to people like Dr. Howerton and others that run the hospital, and even family practitioners, you know, I get that information back that they're doing everything they can, because as you just mentioned, Jimmy, a lot of these folks, you know, people see in church, they see them, you know, at events, or they're part of the community, and they want to make sure that they're doing everything that they can. But ultimately, when folks call, and this is something, an article I could pull and give you the reference on it, but it basically said that pharmacists, particularly in areas that are kind of low wage, or areas that don't have as many advantages, that the pharmacist is the contact for everything related to health care. Secondarily, they may go to a doctor, but it's the easy access, I think, that's important.
Well, and it is easy, and I would debate, we don't have time enough on this program, that even in a metropolitan area, that there is a need when you're dealing with medications to have a pharmacist that you can communicate with, that can help you understand that medicine. I mean, otherwise, all we have to do is to go home, get on the internet, you know, open up literature, and there's some good things there. I'm not saying that that's not a good resource.
But you got to be able to know the difference.
It's black and white. and it does not tell you everything. People say, well, look at these side effects. I said, if you were to look at the side effects of aspirin, you would never take another one, or even Tylenol. And yet we do that safely. But we get a lot of information, and we need all that information, but it should not handicap us in getting the medical care and doing what we need to do when it comes to taking medicine. So, you know, like I say, I agree that pharmacists are a key part of the help team. But you have to make yourself that too. We're just so blessed to have great pharmacists that work with us who want to be in that position, who want to reach out to people and help them, rather than just, you know, stand behind and not worry about what the patient's situation is. And great life, great life.
I want to touch on the supply chain. You know, we've seen a lot here lately with the supply chain as it relates to foods, to restaurants. We've seen farmers in New York and different places across the country literally pouring out milk, destroying it. We just recently saw where one chicken company, over 1.5 million birds euthanized. We also see on the other end, you know, people hungry and needing food. And it gets somewhat perplexing. My question is, do we have a concern of that nature in the supply chain in medicine?
JW, probably there are some reasons to have some concerns, because of one thing. As a country, we decided as consumers years ago that we wanted a lot of stuff and we wanted it cheap. And so we therefore were willing to do whatever it took to accomplish those goals. And that meant that a lot of jobs that were done in this country were moved to other places where people could work at a lesser rate of pay, and therefore the product could be produced cheaper. I'm certainly not saying anything negative about the people who do those jobs. But it was a matter of, how do I provide a product? How do I make a profit? And that's the thing that drives, free enterprise, and make all that work at one time. So now there's a happy medium between, wow, we've helped the world become successful and have a better lifestyle by sharing. But at the same time, we now become vulnerable to that supply chain. What happens if we get into a bad relationship with a country that does a lot of this production, or if they decide they don't want to supply us with it? All this stuff can be turned around, so I don't think we need to panic. We can make change and things could happen. How would that affect us? Nobody knows this at this point in time. But there are a lot of medications that are produced out of the United States at a lot of different places. And of course, a lot of it comes from China. And in that area, because a lot of everything you touch comes from China.
Absolutely.
If you don't believe it, just pick it up and look at the logo on the product.
Some things you wouldn't even imagine until you read the logo.
Well, that's right. And so I don't think we need to get overly alarmed. I think there are things that need to be addressed. And I hope and trust that the people who are in the position to have an influence on those things are looking at that and making sure things get done in an appropriate and proper way. It's going to be an interesting time. I'm not panicked, and it's not only pharmaceuticals. It's everything that we consume, and it will be an interesting play out over the next several months as a lot of things kind of surface. We get through an election year where that seems to take front and center. Yep. At a very critical time too, where a lot of other stuff needs to be front and center, and that's the care of our people and of our country, honestly.
And Jimmy, one of the things that strikes me as we're sitting here talking today is, and I guess I could pose a question in this sense, is that early on, and I look for the day that I can have another discussion and we don't talk about COVID, but everything now is somehow tied to COVID. So did you recognize that earlier than what the average person did, that this thing called COVID, or was this something that kind of showed up on your doorstep like everybody else, or was there other signs or signals of somebody in your position, obviously, that has some connectivity with all kinds of medical stuff? Did you start getting a sense of uneasiness when you heard Wuhan, when you heard, what may be happening? Because that started back in December. The news was leaking some of this stuff.
Yeah,
but it seemed like none of us really saw the impact.
Honestly, no. I mean, I don't think anybody honestly did. It was interesting what we were seeing. We did not see a lot of flu this year at all. We did see a lot of people with upper respiratory challenges that were treated by antibiotics and what have you, but not to the extreme seriousness of illnesses like a lot of people have had with this virus. So the answer is I don't think a lot of people in the ordinary world knew that. Hospitals or anywhere had a sense of what was looming. And I mean, it hit really, really wild and quickly. I mean, you look at what happened in New York City and those type things. It filtered down to us very slowly. But I mean, it was impressive how quickly something like that happened. I don't remember in my lifetime anything being that rampant. I do remember polio when I was young. That was kind of an unknown out there that attacked children and caused paralysis and even death for a lot of kids. But I mean, it was not on the extent that this was. And so I just think it caught us all completely off guard. And the truth is, we still are learning about it, trying to figure out what is it, how do we handle it.
Does it make it anywhere different? This is going to be kind of a quick response question, and we've got a few seconds before the break. But does it make it any different that it is a global pandemic that has impacted everybody in the world as opposed to more predominantly one country?
Well, I think that's an interesting question, because usually the flu, I was looking at a review of from 1918 through 1919, that flu season, and it starts October, ends in March. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure that this has a season. I think that's the thing that's kind of concerning. But the good thing about it is there is hope and there's options.
We're going to take another break and come back and finish this conversation and move on to another piece of the conversation. We're talking with Jimmy Matthews. We're talking about things related as a small business owner here, as a pharmacist. I encourage you to call a friend. Stay tuned. We're coming up on our last segment, and we'll be back in a moment to discuss some additional things related to pharmaceuticals.
To get the most out of your electronic devices, you need a strong internet connection and a protected home Wi-Fi network. You need high-speed internet from Star. Star has the fastest, most affordable high-speed internet service available for all your devices. We have no long-term contracts or high-pressure sales. Our service speaks for itself, and switching is hassle-free. We take care of everything with free installation from a local company. High-speed internet from Star. Internet at the speed of life.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We're coming up on our last segment on We Should Know. Again, I'll remind you that each and every week at 2:30, We Should Know is on the air. It's on Star Communications TV. It's also on WCLN Radio. It's also, there's a summation in the weekly newspaper. We talk to people that have specialty knowledge and expertise in the community. That we talk to everything from doctors. Today we're talking with somebody in the medical community that many people rely on, and we said this going into the show, rely on for oftentimes their medical advice, and sometimes is the first stop, the first place, the first call, and that's through their local pharmacist. And for us, it's Jimmy Matthews with Matthews Pharmacy right here in Clinton. Jimmy, we've talked about a lot of stuff today. I want to kind of get into the world of medicines and pharmaceuticals and what may be happening, some of the things that is the expectation. And the other part now, what we're seeing is in our communities, and you're a big community involvement person. I mean, your business, and I don't have any numbers to throw out, but just having known the kinds of things you've supported, your business has supported a ton of programs in the community. You've supported a ton of teenagers. You have worked a ton of teenagers at your business. This is huge. People respect your opinion. They respect what you do and what you say. Is this storm going to be over? Is there an immediate see to this in that we're expecting too much too quick? Help us understand from your eyes, from what you see, where are we at?
JW, I was reflecting while we were on break, and you've already alluded to one thing that I hope is aware in my life is my dependence on my Lord and Savior and my Creator. And I was just sitting here, at one time smallpox was just rampant, but there was a vaccine. At one time we had infections going rapid, but then somebody discovered penicillin. And I think, you know, throughout history, where something becomes a challenge, the Creator provides a solution. And I do believe that there are people on this earth today who are working hard to get a resolve to this particular problem. And I do trust and think that they will. Right now, what we've got to do is do our part, if we're sincere about this and how it affects other people, about being considerate of not putting people in harm's way and exposing them to something that would not be good for them in their conditions. I mean, I've heard of everything from a lady delivering a baby at 26 weeks because she had the virus, and that baby's still living. The mom has just been released from being quarantined and has seen her baby for the first time. We all know of older adults who had a lot of problems who've died because of this, and young people who've lost their life. And all that gets a lot of headlines today. But there are people working to resolve this problem. And I do trust in the good Lord making that happen. We're His creation, and His care for us is unlimited. And if you look back repeatedly, there has been a solution to every problem, and it's been through man, in most cases, that He chose to put in those positions to give the insight and the knowledge, to know what to do. So I think the worst thing we can do is to panic. I think also the worst thing to do is not be respectful and concerned for other people. That just as soon as somebody says go, that we feel like then that's our green light to do anything that we want to, and not be considerate. And maybe it's a wake-up call that maybe we need to do that in our lives in general, and not be so focused just on about me and myself. And we talked about the supply of medicine. Recently I heard where the sewing operation down in Garland is closing down.
Yeah.
And that broke my heart, because I remember when they've done that a couple of times, and the number of people that affected, because that was a second income for a family. It was also the health insurance for that family. And I remember the first time it happened, the number of people who all of a sudden had no insurance for their families. And that's huge for people. And those jobs get lost to other places. And again, I don't begrudge other people having resources and having opportunities. But I do hate it when sometimes the driving force is our selfishness about what we want out of life, regardless how it affects other people. You talked recently about the direction in which providing health care is going. And there's a lot of interesting things that happen, but you look at it and you say, we don't have as many doctors as we used to. Well, let me tell you, anybody wants to say, well, Dr. So-and-so was rich, he had this, that, and the other. These guys work unreal hard. They go to work before most people even think about it, and they get home later than that. But insurance companies and reimbursements have gotten so tight on health care. Our local hospital, we are so fortunate to have one. But those operations like that get, for lack of a better word, excuse my English, squeezed in reimbursements, that they have to work really, really hard just to keep things, there for us. And we need to be thankful and appreciative that we do have that. But doctors are not there because they couldn't even get reimbursed enough to make a good living for their family. That's why you don't see the number of doctors you saw at one time. You'll see that somewhat in pharmacists. There are a lot of pharmacists who are out there right now who went through this boom, who now are unemployed or in other jobs because the reimbursements got cut back so bad. Absolutely. That we are very fortunate We get an opportunity to choose how we use our resources that we gather. And we invest those in people to provide services for other people. When you get into bigger operations, they use that to drive value of stocks and what have you. And therefore, they sometimes are tempted to cut back on other expenses to be able to guarantee those things. So I think your health care is what you might want to be not panicked about, but concerned about everywhere, but particularly in areas like we're in, where what are we going to do when Dr. So-and-so retires? What are we going to do if a hospital happened to close? Because we are one of very few communities in this state that have a local hospital like we have, and we have a wonderful operation. And those guys work really, really hard to provide us the very best that they can. And so I think those are the things we might ought to take a deep breath and say, okay, what am I willing to give up? What am I willing to invest to make sure that the life that I've enjoyed can be enjoyed by the next generation and the next generation? My wife will say, you say it all the time. How many of y'all ever watched the movie Hunger Games?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. A lot of folks, and that kind of zeroes right in on what you're trying to say, if you've ever seen that.
When all the power goes to one heap,
one little cubicle, and the rest of the cubicles are starving.
We are.
Yeah, and it can easily happen. It can easily happen.
I mean, when everybody wants to get into control everything. Best operation was, I remember this little town. At one time around the courthouse square here, there were at least 5 department stores. Mm-hmm. 5 department stores for a small community.
Remember them well.
And they all survived and made a decent living, but provided a variety of products to people and jobs for this community and helped make this community what it is today in education and everything there. The people who owned those businesses gave back tremendously. But when resources are removed from a community and they consolidate corporations, then no longer are we beneficiaries of some of those blessings that were created. Excuse me, but telephone companies, we used to have one on.
That's right.
Local power company had an office here. Mm-hmm. When I was selling ads for my high school annual, I went to both of those places and they bought one.
Yeah, and we knew those people. There were local people that was running those.
People that ran the grocery store. If I needed something, I could go and ask for an ad, and they bought it.
And I'd be willing to say we're probably envisioning the same people too. And the things that we're talking about, Jimmy, I think is inherently part of that sense of forebodingness, if I can kind of make a word out of that, is that people know how strong and how important that was. And COVID has pushed them into a world now that this is not anything I'm used to. I mean, I've had people look at me and go, I just don't know how long I can keep doing this. And what they're talking about is everything from the mask to not getting close to people to how do we act when we go back to church. I mean, we're doing that now, as I'm sure a lot of churches are, is how do we and what do we put together to make sure that the people at that church, all those people that we love at that church, is not injured further when they come back. But to your point, I think it's critical to look at, as Secretary Cohen says, look at those 3 things that she talks about. The wash, the wearing the mask, the waiting in line, that talks about those kinds of things. Is that critically part of it too? We need to understand to respect that 6-foot space, to, if necessary, wear a mask, not because you might need it, but because of somebody else?
Right. Until we get a handle on this, don't play with somebody else's life. Is what
because that's just being selfish.
Yeah. But you know what I have seen? I loved in my neighborhoods to see families walking, riding bikes. I mean, a lot of things that a lot of us grew up understanding and seeing kids on their bikes with each other. So you see glimmers of a lot of good things. So I think we look at the bright things that can come out of this and not let it control us into fear.
We're coming up on our last break. I want to give you about 20 seconds for anything you want to say in closing. And at that as well, I want to thank you again for being here. So I'll give you the floor for about 20 seconds.
Well, I think what I would do is thank you, JW, for what you do in this program. It is amazing to me. the stuff that you bring to us in our community and the insights that you bring and the research you do and all of that to put together a program like this in our community. And that's just another one of those things that makes this a very, very special place to live. So we thank you.
Well, again, thank you for being with us, and it's always easier to do when I've got people like you that are willing to take your time out of your busy schedule on a day that the weather's not really that great to come in and talk to me. So thank you for being here, and I look forward to seeing you again, as I do look forward to seeing you again right here on this show. And next
Thank you
week.
for tuning in to this week's episode of We Should Know with host J.W. Simmons. If you have a question, comment, or suggestion regarding this or any episode, please send your emails to weshouldknowedu@gmail.com. And remember to tune in every Tuesday at 2:30 for another informative episode of We Should Know.